I'm Felina.
And I'm Summer.
And you are listening to Broken Broken.
Because we're both.
The podcast about living your best life by getting real.
Hey, broken people. This is Summer. And Felina's still out on sabbatical, so I have Carmen with me again. She's going to be co-hosting, and she's actually on location with our guest today. Say hi, Carmen.
Hey, guys. How are you? It's good to be back, broken people.
Can you introduce our guests for us, please?
Hi, broken people. I'd love to introduce you to one of my very, very closest friends, and so close we refer to each other as cousins. Our mothers grew up together. This is Cori Taber, Coritaber. Cori, say hi. Hi, everybody. Cori is in Oklahoma with me. She's lived here in Tulsa as well as Oklahoma City and Norman. Tell us a little more about yourself. So I am an Oklahoma-born and Oklahoma-raised Native American transgender woman. What Carmen said is correct. I currently reside in Oklahoma City, but I spend a lot of time here in Tulsa still, and I definitely claim the town as home. I'm a hairstylist, and recently I've taken up acting and modeling based on many invitations from photographers and runway fashion designers as well. And so one of the things that I'm really focused on right now is bringing about visibility and inclusion in Oklahoma for transgender women such as myself.
Wonderful. Can you tell us what nation?
Ogie Creek and Cherokee, and my family originates in the Tahlequah and Muskogee areas. I am Beaver Clan, and I am a member of Tallahassee Wokogai tribe.
You said you're working on trans visibility, and I saw a Facebook video where you mentioned that, I guess, yesterday or the day before. What's going on with that right now?
Well, there's certain things that are happening in Oklahoma that really resonate with events and occurrences around the country. You know, as you might know, there have been instances where transgender women have been murdered, transgender women have disappeared, and transgender women have been victims of domestic violence. And all of these statistics relate to Black and Native American transgender women specifically that I can speak for. And I am one of those victims. I am a victim of transgender violence in a domestic violence capacity. And this is all part of the missing and murdered Indigenous women scenario that is taking over Indian country and casting a dark shadow on the women of our nations. And these are issues that are very close to home, as you might imagine. Right. And many victims in my family have suffered in intergenerational capacities. It's something that's very passionate for me, because I feel like it's our duty as Native women to be front runners in change for this endemic situation. So those are some of the things that I'm focused on. One area specifically is incarceration. I want to call upon local elected officials to ensure that transgender women, specifically transgender women of color, are safe and treated with dignity and respect in incarceration situations. So those are some of the things that I'm focused on, in addition to modeling and acting. Because again, a lot of this is about transgender visibility and inclusion in a normalization kind of capacity. We want people to understand that we're just like everybody else.
Cori, what is inclusion, and what is a lot of these things that a lot of lay people, and I'm going to say people that aren't activists and people that aren't normally involved, what do you mean when you say that?
Inclusion means two different things to me. One of those things is representation at all levels, whether it mean peer-to-peer education, whether it mean, having actual positions and jobs and paid positions that give us the chance to speak for and advocate for our communities as it relates to policy creation. That's just one small example. Another example is trans visibility, which means I want to see my face in campaigns for the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. I want to see my face in campaigns for, like, Gills Clothing, for example. I want to have those local companies support the LGBT and gender diverse community. And I think that it's important for them to send that message to really garner our support.
Awesome. That's just important as far as I say we as me, Summer, and sometimes the activism community, including yourself. Thank you so much, Cori. We don't get, the memo, if you will, about what inclusion, what intersectional feminism is, and things like that. And I've had to be straightforward in saying we're gonna talk about those things. So back to you, Summer.
It is important, and yeah, it is missing quite often. And I think unfortunately, the trans community gets the brunt of that from a lot of different directions. That's, some of our other communities don't quite have to deal with as much. So I think that's why that representation is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, specifically what you just said is the exact issue that I find to be the most disturbing. If we think about the LGBT movement, we're so quick to honor Marsha P. Johnson, and we're so quick to acknowledge and understand the fact that she had a pivotal role in creating this wave of change, including other street. They call it their organization Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, because their whole goal was to really bring about inclusion, awareness, and acceptance, even back in the 60s and 70s. And as early at that time and all the way to now, they are being ridiculed. We are being ridiculed. We are being mocked. We're being treated with transphobia from within the LGBT community and internalized transphobia from our own brothers and sisters. In addition to that, there's so much misinformation and misunderstanding in the non-trans community that makes it especially challenging for us to make inroads, because these ideas are so ingrained in comedy and we're so often the butt of jokes. But in addition to that, we're also so susceptible to violence.
Well, it's easier to be violent or even exclusionary if you don't see someone as people, right?
It's true. I think it's so easy to dehumanize somebody because it makes you feel more human. It's that whole scenario, that old trope of hurting people hurt people. And that so speaks to the truth of my circumstance. The person that hurt me was a deeply wounded individual. That don't make it right. Oh, sorry.
No, that's true. It doesn't. But
first time, that doesn't make it right. It never made it okay. I had the circumstance of being physically abused and having my home damaged and being isolated from my friends and relatives, and it was miserable. And when you're in the thick of it, it's so hard to see your way out, especially considering the threats that were lodged at me, and that just made it so traumatic that there's PTSD that lingers even today, and that's horrible, but it's true.
How far do you want to go into it to talk about it, to bring this stuff home to people? What kind of threats were made?
Okay,
you don't have to name names.
I don't.
Like that.
There won't be any names until I write the book, because in case you missed it, my dating life is a fucking circus, and so I promised you that I'm writing a book.
Wonderful.
And the thing of this book is going to be Sex and the City meets The Help. Because it's so southern and it's going to be so real, and it's going to be the expose that I'm going to have to consult attorneys on to make sure I can't get sued.
Lovely. I love it.
It's like that, and so, I mean, it's an amazing thing to navigate this world as a transgender woman, and I'm very blessed to be very passable in society in general, and for that reason, I attract a wide variety of men, and there's been circumstances where some of them are very caring and some of them are very hurtful. And the worst threat that ever happened was in the relationship that I got physically accosted in. And this man said, "I dare you to call the police for domestic violence, because as soon as I get out on that charge, I'm going to come kill you." Because what I know for a fact is if I'm getting sent up, I'm getting sent up for murder, not motherfucking bitch-ass domestic violence. Bitch. So keep that in mind. And I'll never forget it. Like, it was the craziest moment in my life, because I know that this was the exact story that my grandmothers experienced. My grandmothers were Native, and they had white alcoholic husbands, and that's exactly who this person was, unbeknownst to me. And it was such an intergenerational loop that it was, traumatic. It was intense and traumatic, and I found my way out of it, and I'm so thankful for that, because I have to say, currently I'm in a very long-term relationship with a Marine who is an amazing human and the kindest person and the most supportive man I've ever dated in my entire life. And he is supportive of my modeling career, my hairstyling career, my efforts at activism, my tribal awareness and my tribal participation, and every aspect of me becoming who it is I feel like I need to be.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you got out of that and into a much better situation.
She's amazing. Can I just have a second to testify if I can?
Go right ahead.
We just gave each other a yes, bitch. hand high five and hand hold in the air over this militarized, lovely man coming into her life. And we've been together as roommates and best friends and all this so many years now that it's just like we just lay. Earlier I was like, hold on, let me extra-twine my legs from yours while I can get up over here. Doing this from the bedroom studio, as it were. And, it's just, I've never seen one person, and I joke that I'm the person most people hope you don't. I motherfucking wish you would. And I am that person. I don't wish for violence. I don't wish for anything, but I always am out to teach a lesson to people. And I've never had to teach a lesson about you, girl. Like, not once. I've never had anyone come at me. I know you had concerns early on that, how people, not anyone, our families close or things like that, how they would treat you, how elders that weren't, in the know, if you will, or, as my grandmother was passing after your mother had passed recently, and things like that. I mean, those types of things and those approvals are some things you can't have guaranteed for you, and you had to be a brave person. I don't care if you want to say a gender with it, a brave person going through a transition, and you're the human being that woke my eyes up to the marginalization and plight of the transgender community, because everybody's like, oh, what's going on? And I always make the joke that, well, I'm just standing up for what they classify me as anyway, because I know you're one of the few people that will stand up and say, oh, yeah, that people have asked me, am I post-op, pre-op, am I, what's the deal? And I'm like, I have a low voice. I'm coming closer to 6 foot tall than I am 5 foot tall. It's an honest, honest mistake. And true. I don't feel any less of a woman. It took me a while. It took me a minute to get the words right and the pronouns right. And then it took me a second to sit down and think about how that made you feel as you're coming into it. And I made sure to never get those different. And not try to rub girl in your face. bitch. I'm not trying to make you feel like any more of, I already called you girl before this. Yes, of course. Before transition, we were an American Eagle, honey. Yes, bitch. Oh my God, I'm dead. Oh my God. Okay, so true story, true confession. I used to rock American Eagle because the thing is, I wore slacky clothes first of all, I never saw myself as a gay man. Every day from the very beginning of my early adolescence, I always saw myself as a third gender person. It's made me honor my spirit in a way that I never really felt permission to do. And so I hid behind all these frumpy clothes and this non-binary ideology because I had this most horrendous self-doubt. I thought there's no way I'll ever be pretty. There's no way I'll ever be accepted. There's no way my family will continue to consider me family. And ultimately, I just had to make the decision that none of that mattered more than my emotional well-being. And so for those reasons, that's why I made the choices that I made. And I don't regret it. And I think that most trans people don't. I think that we feel like it's a special blessing to have this type of understanding of life. It's like that for me, for sure.
So has your family been supportive?
Oh my gosh, so about that. I have a twin brother.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in our lives, we were identical twins.
Mm-hmm.
And he identifies as a two-spirit person as well. He is my best friend on planet Earth. And he lives in Brooklyn, and he hangs out with my super, super fly, super non-binary, super naughty squad. And they just all love each other, and it makes me feel so happy because I know that he's protecting them and they're protecting him. And it's a beautiful thing, but we stay in constant contact, and that's really amazing. I have a biological father I'm not close to and haven't been since I was a teenager, which has nothing to do with my gender identity. And I have a mother who is deceased and a grandmother. Actually, both of my grandmothers are deceased. And what I'm left with is a stepdad who is remarried, and I have a stepdad who's married to my stepmom. And they are the most supportive parents I've ever had. And it's just super beautiful. And what's even more crazy is they're fundamentalist Christians, and they're white as hell.
Wow.
They're the most beautifully supportive and beautifully loving and beautifully accepting people. And I think that
beautifully white.
They are beautifully white folks. And I love white people. I feel so blessed
to be able to make people like that understand something that they never, ever could have understood otherwise.
Right.
And I feel like that's something that, I feel like there's two really types of trans people in this world. I feel like there's those of us who are very broken and who can't speak their truth and can't own and articulate and publicly claim their truths. And I don't judge that because there's a million reasons why. But then I think there's those of us who have always known and have had plenty of time to accept it and plenty of time to understand it and get comfortable with the truth. And, you know, I think that my culture made that especially true for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that I'm able to share that with people because it's a type of visibility. And, you know, what I touched on earlier with this visibility inclusion scenario relates to circumstances that have been withheld from us. Let me give you an example. With Will and Grace, it was nothing but tropes. It was trope after trope after trope, but it was the 90s, and that was the gig. It was that way on Friends. It was that way on Sex and the City. If you go back and look, it's trope after trope, and it's tacky as hell. And it's so problematic by today's standards, and it blows my mind. But what it did is at that time, it created acceptance then. And it created a level of acceptance that made people comfortable with it. Even straight men, even straight women. You know, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy totally does the same type of shtick. And what's even worse is when it comes to things like Pose or Orange is the New Black, it's the same thing but worse. It's just like there's just too much that makes it look like a circus or a clown, like a type of an act, a farce, you know. And so, I mean, let's talk about Pose. You know, when you think about it, what you see is this circumstance that happened in a time and place that's so far removed from our current reality. And those people lived a so very different experience of what it means to be LGBT. And it's not that different from what Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera experienced only a decade before. And so if you look at it by today's standards, our truths are more refined, our truths are more supported, our truths are more understood, but at the very same time, it's still to a very limited degree. And so what needs to happen is we need trans people on Oprah, we need trans people on KFOR, we need trans people on the Mathis Brothers commercials, we need trans people representing the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, we need trans people on the board of directors at Freedom Oklahoma, we need trans people lobbying the Democratic Party for the state of Oklahoma. We need people that are talking to Mayor David Holt and saying, you need to make this a priority. We need to do these things because this is how we win.
Amen to that.
Yes.
Well, here's a couple of things written down on this, and I was just saying we pretty much covered trans in Oklahoma. What about anything else to say about being trans in tribal Oklahoma for us skins out here, us natives out here?
Yeah, let me talk about that. I think that my trans experience as a Native American woman who first identified as non-binary is vastly different from every other Native American trans woman you'll ever encounter. And what I mean by that is I came from Midtown. My parents were born and raised in downtown and Midtown Tulsa, and their parents and their grandparents came from places like Otaha and Renniesville and Boynton, these checkerboard communities that are Black and Native communities. And, you know, west of Muskogee and in Tahlequah proper, out in the middle of nowhere in the 18-somethings, you know, and these are who I come from. You know, I come from a lot of families, and if you guys really want the rundown one day, I'll give it to you, because it's like a roll call, and I'm ready with it. But
you're coming back, honey.
Okay, I'm coming.
You may become our satelliting host.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Let me get into it, because, you know, there's so much more to say. But one of the things that I love the most is that I had the opportunity as a teenager to explore spirituality, and being a Midtown person, I had no exposure to church because I'm a heathen, and I had no exposure to Soviets because I'm a city Indian. And, you know, being more white than Native makes my scenario even more precarious, because listen, bitch, these blue eyes are pretty, but they sure do mark me as a half-breed. Trifling term to use, but it's my personal reality, and people have to remind me. Aside from that, I would say that most of my experience with people that are urban natives from coast to coast, you know, from, you know, the Bay Area American Indian Two Spirits to American Indian Community House in New York City, have been very supportive of me, and they've provided me lots of really amazing opportunities. I actually got the chance to go to Governor's Island this summer and have a workshop about missing and murdered Indigenous women on behalf of American Indian Community House, and get the chance to speak to the New York Native American community, because one thing that they're lacking is intense cohesion, because it's such a diaspora scenario, and people need to have those moments to come together and really get creative and get focused.
That's really exciting that you got to bring that to the Intercoast. Like, very exciting.
Absolutely.
It was a beautiful thing. That's the other thing too, is it's a really fucked up thing, because what happened was, when I was there, it was during the weekend of the anniversary of Pride, the anniversary 50th of Stonewall. And during that time, it was the most amazing and beautiful celebration for gay men.
Will you break down Stonewall for us honorarily, just because I think we use it a little more openly than people know. Go right ahead.
So in 1969, there was a riot that took place in a gay bar. It was an undercover gay bar called Stonewall in the Village. I think it's on Christopher Street. And it was a secret gay bar, and there are reports that say that the trans women of color were the first ones to throw the bricks, the first ones to attack the cops, the first ones to take the lead in revolting, because they had enough, because this was the circumstance consistently in New York City. Trans women, especially trans women of color, were harassed and beaten and attacked and robbed by the police.
Like, they weren't a speakeasy, they were there because they had to gather in secret.
It was a matter of personal safety, without a doubt.
Absolutely. Which I don't think people really understand, the personal safety issue and how important that is. But we'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah, for sure. We can discuss that again. But back to Stonewall, it was kind of a pivotal moment, a landmark moment. There's actually a more important moment that I'd like to address, and it's Compton's Cafeteria in 1966 in San Francisco. And it's a much unsung scenario, but I think that it predates the fact that trans women were revolting everywhere. And I think that there's two examples of interest that you could really look up. You can go online and Google it, or you can view a kind of fantasy version of the story in Armistead Maupin's Tales of the City, because they did a beautiful portrayal that included Olympia Dukakis. That being said, what happened was, there was this 50th anniversary scenario that coincided with an event called World Pride. And World Pride is a traveling party that goes from one city to the next every single year, like the Gay Olympics of parties. And so, I mean, it's something else, I have to say. So what I know is that there are approximately 4 to 5 million additional people in the NYC Metro for this weekend, and it made it really taxing, because the most odd and bizarre thing was to know that the majority of them were cisgender gay men, and that they were there for like hookup style, circuit party style weekend times. And there were several moments throughout the weekend, and you guys can look this up online. I don't want to waste your one night with these stories, but you can look up all these events where trans women of color were attacked and jeered at and mistreated, and the police were called on them, and they were physically attacked in Jackson Heights. And there were so many circumstances throughout this particular weekend that made it really, really, really frustrating and uncomfortable to be a trans woman of color at Pride. And in addition to that, I wore a ribbon skirt, and I marched in both the Queer Liberation March and the World Pride March. And I have to say, this was probably the 20th LGBT Pride Parade I've marched in a ribbon skirt of some sort, or a traditional tribal dress. And I'm letting you know right now, it's going to be the last. Because what happens for Native American people in the LGBT community is that when you see us in our tribal clothing, looking our best and feeling our best, what the response is confusion, or tokenism, or mocking, or sexualization,
Right.
None of these things are appealing, and none of these things are a feel-good scenario. They all feel like the most disappointing mockery of reaching out to somebody and accessing their humanity. And so because of that, I will never be wearing tribal clothing again at such an event, because it's not for those eyes, and I've discovered that for the 20th time too many. Ooh, I like this.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I made that same rule, I think, two or 3 years ago, that I won't wear my clothing unless it's a Native-led event, for that reason, because it becomes fetishized and tokenized, and I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, it's really appalling, and I think that it's safe to say, but the prettier of an Indian girl you are, and the more multiracial white-leaning you appear, the more we're tokenized and more sexualized, because the more appropriate we are to, and the more palatable we are to white America.
Can I just put in this, like, where it will fit in? Girl, since we have been Facebook friends and stuff like that, you know what this, like, when it comes up on your Facebook and says, you have a friend request, and it's a single man, guess who I have in common with them, honey?
It's always me.
Baby girl.
It's always.
And I jokingly am like, I'm getting secondarily fetishized, not by me. And I'm like, but by Cori people. Like, really? And then I'm like, I'm going to have to go kill everybody.
Listen, like, there's two reasons why I accept a lot of friend requests that I probably shouldn't. And one of them is because I want them to understand. It's kind of a modeling thing. It's kind of a networking thing. And Carmen gets it because Carmen's a model too. And
in a salon.
And in a salon. We have the exact same jobs in life. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things that, you understand, because you never know when your networking opportunity is going to come through. You never know who knows who. And you never know who's going to come at you with this confused approach and then learn something new and learn a new way to respect you. And I feel the same way whenever I go to work every day. Because I work in a salon, I make a lot of money for my salon owner. I make a lot of money for myself. I have a beautiful time. I love my job every day. I love that I can leave it at the door, but I love that every day when I come in, I'm fully present. I think it's amazing, and I think that it's beautiful, and I think that it's a spectacular thing that I've got a clientele that is very supportive. But the irony of that is only about 2/3 of them have any idea. And so I think that it's a weird thing being a trans woman, because that makes you feel really good. Because in my opinion, that makes me feel like they're seeing me the way that I am, mm-hmm. not the way that somebody else once knew me. But I think that that's one of the reasons that I accept so many, friend requests from single and married guys. It was the most amazing thing the other day. I accepted a request from a married guy whose name I recognize. I won't name him, but he's a photographer, and his wife is a photographer. And she saw me on Facebook because I liked some of her photography. And she told her husband, we've got to photograph this girl. She's beautiful. And so they reached out to me. And it's just, you never know how you're going to meet people. And I'm open to that. And I'm making sure that I'm open to that. And I'm making sure that those opportunities that can come my way will. Because I know that, for better or worse, there's not a lot of people trying to do what I'm trying to do right here.
To be closeted is one thing, and then to be proud enough to feel that you are taking. I love your photography. I love the pictures you're taking. I love your tastefulness, and girl, I hope you've got some personal ones behind the scenes and such, because yours are so modest in a good way. And I mean, like, I'm so respectful that I'm like, I've been a model, and I've been a moderately discretionary female, and I mean, I've flashed a little more than I thought I was going to have to make sure that shit was free.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, she's not even having to do that. Look at her with her clothes on.
Yeah. That's one thing that my boyfriend is really supportive of. He said all along that, he realizes that I'm not just a model, that I am a transgender model, and that will bring a certain type and a certain amount of visibility at some point. And he is unwavering in his support, and that's the most beautiful thing, because he's the sexiest, sweetest straight man. And there's nothing unique about him except for the fact that the growth of us is a little bit different.
So speaking of that visibility, can you let our listeners know where they can follow you to see your amazing photographs?
Yes. You can find me on Instagram at the Cori Taber, Coritaber. And if you're interested in the work that I do in the salon, you can follow me at Cori Taber. And both of those are my Insta tags. And then in the instance that maybe you're not an Insta kind of person, you can also find me on Facebook, and you're welcome to friend request me or follow me there as well.
You can contact the podcast at brokebrokenpodcast@gmail.com. The Broken Podcast can be found online at www.brokebrokenpodcast.com, on Twitter at BrokeBrokenShow, on Instagram and Facebook at BrokeBrokenPodcast. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube.